All right, in this video, we're going to actually be taking a look at forensics toxicology as a way to assess poison and whether or not a person has been poisoned. On Thursday of this week, Dr. Jerry Lycan is going to be joining our class and talking about poisonings in Cook County as he deals with the Poison Control Center and people that have been poisoned, what happens to them, how to get them better, how to help them survive, etc. So let's take a look at poisons, right? So here are a lot of examples of poisons that we may or may not experience in our everyday lives. You may not realize, for example, that antifreeze is extremely poisonous. In fact, many dogs and cats, Dr. Lakin will tell us on Thursday, end up getting poisoned by antifreeze because it'll leak out of a car onto the garage floor, has a very sweet taste. When the dog or cat taste it, they like it, they keep licking it, and it only takes a few milliliters, not a few drops of this to fatally wound and injure an animal. And so it's a pretty big problem. And then there are some other examples of natural toxins and poisons. So toxicology, as you can see, it's a study of the effects that these chemicals have on living organisms. There are three types or multiple types of toxicology. There's environmental toxicology, which looks at poisons that are in the air, the water, or the soil. There's consumer toxicology, where you look at foods, drugs, cosmetics, and their impact on human lives. And Dr. Lycan is a medical toxicologist. He receives these people in the hospital and tries to understand what's happening to their body, right? So there's lots of types of toxicology. Want to define two words here: poisonous versus venomous. Poisons are chemicals that will injure you or impair bodily functions. Venoms are any poison that's injected from one animal to another. So a venomous animal would be a snake, right? Versus a poisonous animal would be a frog, right? These little dart frogs, they don't inject their poison. You have to touch them. So that is what is going on here. There's a long history of poison, as we can see. Poisons have been around for over almost 7,000 years. It was in the Roman Empire, right? That reigned for thousands of years. It was the number one method of assassination. And I think we'll ask a question about this: why you think it was so popular for assassinating political figures? What was it about poison that made it a common assassination tool? The modern era, poisoning is less common. You can think about why that may be. But we just had a case 2 years ago in England where two people who Russia wanted to kill were poisoned, and there was a huge fight from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin blaming different people. But the British United Kingdom authorities believed the Russians were trying to kill undercover spies. Is what happened. So two ways poisonings can happen. An acute poisoning is one that happens from over a short period of time from only one or a few exposures, right? So this would be inhaling a poisonous gas and getting really sick or dying. That would be acute poisoning. Chronic poisoning is more of a long-term repeated exposure. So this would be like the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, who over years of working with mercury to make hats, that's why he was the Hatter, the mercury got into his brain and eventually caused him to go insane. And that is where the mad in Mad Hatter comes from, is that hatters, people that made hats, were chronically exposed to mercury and often would go insane because of the chronic exposure. So, what are the factors that affect poisoning? There's 9 of them. You can read there, and these are in order of kind of the importance of them, right? So the number one thing, how much you take, the dose. Number two thing, how strong was that dose? How strong was the amount you took? How did you take it is the number 3 thing that affects poisoning. The fourth is your tolerance. That is both a genetic and a physical trait, right? The age that you are affects how quickly you can be poisoned. The route of absorption and administration, the state that you were in when you were taking it. Were you healthy or were you already sick? Your general health, and then other drugs that you may have been taking that could have created a cumulative effect. These all affect how a poison will act in your body. Right? So these toxic substances may cause death, they may contribute to a death, they may cause impairment, and they may explain your behavior. So a couple general classes of these poisons: gases, poisonous gases, inorganic poisons. These are things that you would have learned about in chemistry. Alkaloidal poisons and non-alkaloidal poisons. And we'll talk about these. So an example of a gas would be carbon monoxide. It occurs when you inhale too much carbon monoxide. The problem with carbon monoxide is that it is a colorless, odorless, tasteless substance. You will not know it's poisoning you as it is poisoning you. And what you can see here is a telltale sign of carbon monoxide poisoning is these red splotches on the skin. This is an actual photo from an autopsy. It only takes 1% concentration in air can lead to death in 3 minutes. We have a firefighter last year came to class and told us when you have your carbon monoxide detectors, they should be high in your room, not on the ground. They should be maybe on top of your curtains or attach them high on the wall. The reason is carbon monoxide is less dense than air. It will rise to the top of the ceiling first and then fill the room downward. So you make sure that you've got the carbon monoxide detectors up high. That way it'll go off early and give you a chance to get out if there's a problem. So here's an example of a heavy inorganic poison, lead. Lead interferes with a variety of processes in the body, pretty much every organ in your body. Lead is bad too, and it can interfere with the development of the nervous system. Children are extremely vulnerable to lead, and it's believed, one of the theories, violent crime has been on the decline in America since the 1970s. One of the reasons they think that it may be on the decline is because gasoline used to have lead in it in the 1960s. That was outlawed. Prior to that, children were inhaling a lot more lead, which led to a slow development of the frontal lobes, which control emotions, and especially in boys. And it was believed that lead exposure may have led to a higher rate of crime and a higher rate of violence in young men. And because lead is now out of the environment, it's not in the air because gasoline doesn't have it anymore, violent crime has been on a steady decline. It's one theory, anyways. Another heavy metal poison is mercury. We talked about the Mad Hatter, but mercury, the symptoms over the short term include sensory impairment, vision, hearing, speech. It can cause, if you eat certain fish, the fish can contain mercury. You can look like certain fish you can only eat once a month, like shark, pike, albacore, tuna. You can eat once or twice a week. The bigger the fish, the more mercury it has, the less of it you should eat. And again, you can see a telltale signs, this purpling of the feet, because mercury is a heavy metal. It tends to kind of settle in the body to the lower points. And this would be a sign in an autopsy that someone suffered from mercury poisoning. Arsenic creates a lot of problems. It can come from groundwater in certain places. As the poisoning develops, there are convulsions and changes in the fingernail pigmentation. We can see that the fingers here, the fingernails show these stripes, which is a telltale sign of a chronic, not acute, but chronic exposure to arsenic. Thallium and polonium are radioactive substances that can be used as poisons. These are two cases. Joanna Zavolinsky was poisoned with thallium here, and this was a Russian spy that was poisoned with polonium on an airplane. And his story is fascinating if you want to read about it. They think it was slipped into his food, and he ate the food. When he landed, he became immediately sick, nauseous. His hair began to fall out. You can see this. This is only 3 days later after the poisoning, how quickly the poison acted on his body. Cyanide, we've talked about in class, can be entered through inhalation, ingestion, or direct skin contact. There is a medical examiners during an autopsy will notice a very bright cherry red color to the victim's skin when there's cyanide poisoning. And remember, with this, there's a strong scent of almond smell with cyanide poisoning. Strychnine is a horrible poison. This is what rat poison is. It's a very bitter taste. You can't disguise it. and it will cause a lot of pain in the person, convulsions, asphyxia in the victim. And this is a poison that was more common back in the day. Ricin is naturally occurring. A few grains of ricin can kill an adult human. So its LD50 is very low, and it was used. Ricin was sent in letters that were addressed to the White House and other political figures back in the 90s. Oh, by the way, you can get ricin from the castor bean, Castor. There's a scene in Breaking Bad where he uses castor beans to try to make ricin to poison his enemies. Pesticides can be chronic poisons, things that you're exposed to over time. They're released in our environment. They're not meant to kill us. They're meant to kill insects, but humans and other animals suffer the consequences of these. An example of this would be Roundup, which has been shown to be extremely harmful to our gut bacteria and causes cancer because of the way it interacts with our gut biome. Other household items that are considered poisons would be bleach, antifreeze, drain openers, oven cleaners, pain relievers, dish soap, and even laundry detergent, right? We saw the Tide Pod Challenge a few years ago. Please don't start that up again, right? That is, and I asked Dr. Lycan about this on Thursday. He has seen people that were sent to him poisoned by the Tide Pod Challenge. These are some plants that you may come across that have varying degrees of toxicity. Nightshade, hemlock, curare, mushrooms, oleander, yew, and then mistletoe, believe it or not, is poisonous. So this is a way to think about LD50. If a taste to a drop can kill you, it's extremely toxic. If it takes a spoonful or two, medical examiners, toxicologists think this is a high toxicity. An ounce or two, right? 3 or 4 teaspoons would be moderate. If it's a pint, like a milk pint, that would be slightly poisonous. If you have to drink a whole quart of it to get sick, it's practically non-toxic. Anything more than a quart is harmless. And then to prove a case, right, as a medical toxicologist, you would have a lot of work to do. You'd have to prove that there was a motive, there was intent, that the person who you're suspecting had access to the poison, they had access to the victim, that the death itself was a homicide. And finally, and the hard part, is that the death itself was caused by a poison and not some other means. So these are all roadblocks in the proving of a case as a forensic toxicologist. So that is it. Let me know if you guys have questions. We're gonna create a Ed puzzle with this. So, all right.